Hey everybody, this is Dustin with Utah News. Reaching out to you again today. This one's going to be a little longer, so I want to be a bit more casual and just kind of talk to you about it because there's a lot going on today. First off, I wanted to say happy birthday to my father. He turned 77 today. Can't believe it. He's still kicking pretty good. I'm going to have some fun with him this weekend, but it's been a good day overall. We heard some just random other news in the country too. I guess Trump appointed Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, and John Voight to be the ambassadors of Hollywood, which could be really cool. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge fan of Sylvester. Love Mel Gibson. John Voight has always been really cool. So that could be interesting. I don't know what that really entails to be the ambassador of Hollywood, but that is pretty interesting. We also still have the confirmation hearings happening, which are fun to watch. There's been some banter back and forth, and it's been pretty good. And here in Utah, I know the weather's been crazy. Anybody that's been here as long as I have, we know about the inversion that we get, and it's not fun not seeing the sun. But if you take a drive up the canyons, you can typically see it pretty good. And we've had kind of a theme going this past week in regards to housing, immigration, and some of the other facets that affect that. And today we're going to continue with it, and we're gonna start particularly in Utah, and then I have another piece part of it that's going to dive into a larger scale segment that you may or may not know about, and it goes a lot further back. So just to get started here on that note, thanks for joining. Glad you're here. Please share it. First off, here is a lot of the just challenges in the growth of Utah. Anybody that lives here knows we're growing. There's a lot of people that come in, whether it's from out of state, out of country, and also just population growth is normal. So that brings a lot of challenges that come into Utah. But one of these in particular, we have three particular items that I'm going to share with you. There's going to be some images that are shown to you visually, and hopefully we can share what they are so you can do that research yourself as well. First off, is this one is actually a director of the University of Utah, and I apologize. I'm going to be looking down at some notes here and there because there's a lot to today. Now, this is Natalie Goshner. I apologize if I didn't say that correctly. But she is the director of the University of Utah's Kim C. Gardner Policy Institute. And what this is in regards to some of the six transitions happening in Utah and what it means for our future. Okay. Now, the 6 points that she mentions are pretty obvious. It is, growth to a mid-sized state. The statistics say we're about the 30th in growth amongst the United States. So out of 50, we're not in that middle section, but we're quite there. And who knows, maybe we'll have 51 or 52 or 53 states coming up. But another is the increasing diversity. As we all noticed, there's a lot of new people coming in. The aging population. That's a concern all around. Working in an industry I've been in for years, not going to mention much about it. It's one of the largest drivers of conversation is the boomers. Everybody's getting a little older. And, one of the other topics they mention is an elite economy. We'll get into that a little bit more, but that's how they word it is elite economy. And then housing unaffordability. Anybody that lives here knows the house I purchased about 13 years ago is completely unaffordable now. It's ridiculous. And then the demographic shift. So those are the six main topics that are covered in the transitions Utah is making and our future altogether. So we're going to dive into each one of these as far as Utah goes itself and some more of the plans going forward, what that means, and we're going to take a deeper dive. But going into that, so just zip that to the growth in general. There we go, the 30th largest state by population overall. So as we all know, that brings a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges with it. When you're growing in a state, sometimes you have infrastructure that can't hold those people, that maybe there's not enough jobs, maybe there's not enough housing. And you see that anywhere you go. If it's even a company that's growing, you might have, too many challenges coming up and you're not sure if you can hire for them yet or not, just because you have to fix some systems and keep growing. And that's the same for the economy all around, our infrastructure, our resources, jobs that are available, housing that might be available, may not be available, and then also where. A lot of it too is transportation. Um, but going with that too on the diversity scale, about 1 in 4 Utahns now is what this reads that come from a different background or ethnic minority background, and that's up from 1 in 10 previously. Personally, I have no problem with that. I mean, you're going to have people moving in all the time, especially we have different states nearby. Look at California, Washington, Oregon. You live in Utah, you know we constantly get people that relocate from those states all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. Become part of Utah, help us grow. And then the elite economy, basically what it means is just that we rank typically in one of the top 3 states for job growth and economic performance altogether. So more or less higher incomes, typical higher paying jobs, and the performance of our economy in general. And again, if you're born and raised here like I was, you know that Utah has always been a number one resource for entrepreneurs and good technology, good financial structure, a lot of agriculture. There's just a lot of opportunity here in general. So they mean it by elite economy, but I find the verbing a little interesting. So take it as you will, but it is true. We do have those opportunities. And then on the housing and affordability, the statistic on this is a little interesting. It's the eighth most expensive housing market in the country. Now, being the eighth most expensive housing market, anybody that's been to New York, go try to find a hotel, apartment. I mean, you can be living on Fifth Avenue and paying a good 50,000 a month for certain areas. It is what I've heard. I don't know. The statistics are not backed by mine, but it's what I've heard anyway. And then California, I know I've heard some people that have moved from California to Utah that find some of the new housing that's going up downtown to be almost comparable. And that's about 3,400 a month for an apartment building downtown. And to me, being in Utah, that's unrealistic. I grew up in a time, in my early 20s, even you could find an apartment for $600, not a big deal. You can still find outside the city apartment buildings for, 1,000, maybe 1,500 per month. But it is getting ridiculous, considering how when I bought my house, and this is only 10 years ago, mind you, and what it might go for now. We're going to show you some of the statistics a little bit later. It's pretty insane. Um, and then the demographic shift overall. A lot of this talks about the outside the state instead of within, and that has to do with more of just families. We will get more into depth on that a little later, but it does. It has to do with our birth rate and people having actual nuclear families, getting involved, having children, and growing. Our economy that way and our population has shifted completely. So most of it is coming in from out of state. How much will probably surprise you. One of it goes back to, if everybody remembers, the 2002 Olympics. If you were here or not, we did host the 2002 Olympics. And it was a fantastic time. I was a little young and I really didn't know what to think about everything. And I was just having a good time with it all. So going to the events, being downtown and seeing changes to our laws and things of that nature, just to hold an international society that was coming in and make them feel welcome. I thought it was a lot of fun at the time, but it does go into that because the International Olympic Committee, all of the funding from international sources. But in this article itself is Goshner, as I mentioned before, Natalie Goshner. She highlights the lasting positive impact of hosting the 2002 Olympics, including increased confidence, economic growth, and global visibility for Utah. Okay, all in all, that's a good, happy statement, to be honest, because we have been growing and opportunity and growth is a good thing. So I don't disagree with that. Now, going into the future challenges go on that is managing it as far as doing it smartly, progressive infrastructure, or just positive infrastructure and where it's located, making sure it's not interfering. And then housing affordability. We mentioned that before, how it's getting drastically higher. And that's a big concern. You know, more people coming in drives the economy up. All these things have a factor in that. and then preparing for potentially hosting the Olympics again in 2034. I feel that's a topic we need to have another day, but that has a lot of implications for the way Utah is going and the money behind it. There's tons of opportunities, of course, with that goes challenges. Now, going into that is where some of these policies get a little weird and some of the conversations come from. Because anybody that knows me has heard me talk about certain topics. And I guess you could say that it's not without its honesty. I mean, growth is good. Growth is never a bad thing. I guess it's how you go about it. Now, this one comes straight from utah.gov, and this is the Keepers of Utah's Flame. It's the economic opportunity for the new Utah. Anytime somebody says a new Utah, it's questioning to me, for lack of a better word, what was wrong with the old Utah. Um, but that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But for this particular topic, it goes into that we've become a mid-sized state with external growth. And if you look at it, the declining fertility rates in general do contribute to that. We're not having as many babies, not as many families. There's a lot more divorces, a lot more problems that come around it. It does say that even in the US itself, fertility rate dropped to the lowest in a century as births dropped in 2023. That's pretty concerning. And I think it's the Lancet report. This was back in March of last year, says the dramatic declines in fertility rates are set to transform the global population patterns by 2100. Well, 75 years from now, probably enough. That's really hard to say, is only 75 years from now. Um, but on the next slide, too, this one I do want you to see. And this is the total fertility rate. And that's right on this PowerPoint presentation that they did give. It's from 1960 to 2022. It goes from, and now looking at the population itself, and this is from the National Center for Health Statistics. So you'll see a 4.3 as far as the fertility rate goes, and that's just in Utah, which we've all known Utah to have large families. That was fairly normal when I was growing up. And then the US wasn't far below, around 3.5, and it steadily declines. And looks like currently we are just in Utah at 1.85. That is quite a drop in just the fertility rate alone, not to say anything about people moving in, which we'll get into a little bit, but yeah, that's a huge drop. And it does go in that we maintain an elite economy, but we face challenges with affordability. I feel that goes hand in hand because we have high rates going in. Nobody can have a family because things cost so much. They're working full-time jobs. They've got to work two, three jobs. That makes it quite a bit difficult. And the largest piece of this here that may shock some of you is the in-migration segment. Now, population growth itself is not a bad thing. Like I mentioned, it's where it comes from. And that's the largest thing. So the biggest point they mention in this new Utah report is that there is a trend of continued net in-migration and declining fertility rates. So it's a combination of both. We're not having enough kids, so a lot more people are moving in. I'm not going to say where from. Could just be another state. We're just having a lot of inward migration from elsewhere. They're not domestic to Utah. And then to continue back into some of the topics, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more all the way through some of these highlights, is the economic performance. Okay. So with that, we no longer lead in job growth, which we did for quite a while. And there's a slide on here. I'm hoping we can show this to you. It's pretty drastic if you see in the numbers. It says Utah's job growth, and this is year over percentage change from April of 2024. Okay. And it goes into the different industries where job growth has come from. The total number is 2.1% in job growth. That's okay, sure. Now, the industries that are changing, I find a little interesting, and this has to do, if you just look at the numbers themselves, what's happening to Utah with people coming in, the family rate. We've got construction at 5.4% overall is some of the job growth, which is great. I know a lot of construction workers, a lot of blue collar families. That's amazing. We love good workers. The second highest is health and private education. Okay, that's really good. We need good healthcare workers, things of that nature, and private education is a great thing as well. Depending what's going on, of course, that's a different conversation, but it's nice to see that that's growing. The third largest, though, is government. It's 4.7. Find it interesting. It's kind of a trend across the country right now that government jobs are the highest growing industry in the country. I, that's an interesting conversation. Now, on the negative side, just to let you know about is information is negative 0.2%. That's strange to me because we had those infrastructure, or I guess you could say storage facilities. Facebook moved here. We had a facility that was part of, I believe, a government corporation down in Utah County that developed, and then we have Adobe and all these companies here. So information and tech, I find that interesting. And then financial activities is also down 0.9%. Well, we had a really good financial infrastructure here around Utah. So being that that's down 0.9%, I'm surprised. And then leisure and hospitality. That's the biggest surprise to me. We're one of the largest leisure and hospitality states in the nation. We have what, five national parks, over 17 state parks. Uh, Leisure and hospitality is, one of our largest drivers, and not to mention the film festivals, things that go on around here. It's pretty crazy. Um, so that's a big surprise to me. Now, some of the factors that drive the economic growth, obviously, we've talked about that a little bit, is, well, this comes down to the raw resources about how that is driven is the natural endowments, raw materials, which is going to be your land, property around Utah. And the next one is going to be your human capital, labor, what's available, who can work. And that's a big one too, because if you don't have people that can work, it's really hard to drive that growth. And then tools of production, which is just capital, having the money to do that, the resources to help develop. Entrepreneurship, again, is the creativity. We were always one of the top four entrepreneurs in Utah. And I've heard we still are in a lot of ways. It was kind of the home for the entrepreneur. I remember growing up, the multi-level marketing companies that would come out of Utah. Not to say I didn't try to participate, but we always have companies popping up in Utah. Might be because of our labor laws, our tax laws. Who can really say? But we can always have a thought about that. We've got a lot of creativity, so entrepreneurs are very welcome here. Um, and of course, all those fundamentals really improve the economic strength of Utah and just the growth of us all together. Now, one of it that we go into here on some of the challenges is we do rank really well in the middle class. We do. And again, I'm going to pull up a slide here on my side. We may or may not show it to you, but we will give you the resources to find these. So don't worry. And this one goes into the middle class share and income equality compared to other states, which is really good to know because amongst those, it's not to say that we're bad off, but as far as income goes, we've dropped quite a bit. And this goes into a lot of the educational resources too. So amongst the growth rate is with education is our degree system. Now, this one is a share of adults 25 or older with a bachelor's degree and or higher, okay, by state. And this report's from 2022, mind you. It is a little down from there. But we were among, let's see, it looks like about the top 17 is 37.9%, which is pretty amazing considering the average for the whole entire US was 35.7. Your first being somewhere like Massachusetts, your lowest was something like Mississippi. And not to say that that's good or bad, but that's pretty impressive. 25 or plus with a bachelor's degree or higher. That is really impressive. And then on the complacency, yeah, and I would agree, is the complacency of Utah with our growth rate and improvement, I guess you could say, is a little bit concerning. Now, there's many factors that go into that, though, so I'm not going to say that that's the only thing. And this one goes into the share of students that do actually read. They're above the basic in reading and math in Utah. This is 2022. And this goes fourth grade, eighth grade for Utah and the US on average. And typically we are above average in the entire US, which is great. And this comes from the National Report Card. It's NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress. Okay, so you can find it there. You can find it in this report too. This report, like I said, is utah.gov. It comes straight from the University of Utah. Now, going into that, it summarizes that really Utah's got a lot of migration coming in. And the slide offhand that I really wanted to show you is that with our decline in fertility rate, okay, we're not having as many kids. We don't have the nuclear family we used to have. 60% of our inflow of new people into Utah has been from migration. Okay, that's concerning. For one, they're not from here. Okay, that's fine. Everybody likes new people. That's great. Not a big deal. Where are they coming from is my second question. And maybe you can question that too. I don't want to give you any bias that I have an opinion that they're bad or anything. It's a concerning. We're not having kids. So 60% of the growth of Utah is from out of state. And it could be from Arizona, could be from Nevada, could be Colorado, could be Washington, could be out of country. I don't know. The actual numbers, still 60% of the growth of Utah is not from Utah. Okay, that's only 40% that is. And that could even be families that have been here for a few years and they're growing families here now. That's great. That's 40%. That's a positive number in my eyes, too. And again, immigration is a good thing. It's still finding where they're coming from and that it's not Utah actually having family. People used to come here all the time to have a family. It was always known for that. So I guess that's why it's a little questionable to me. Now, on that note, this overall message, it just stresses the importance of adapting really to Utah, just our changing demographics overall. Um, yeah, we have a huge economic landscape. There's so many industries here. There's so much opportunity for growth. And we've had so many successes in the past. We wouldn't be where we are without it. But we have to be concerned about those successes because some of the successes and where the money comes from, ask about it. Make sure you're asking questions on what's happening. And down here in these reels goes into the affordability of it. For one, is our entire Utah market. And this is the existing homeowner versus a marginal buyer. Okay. Now, back, oh, geez, I think this goes back to 1990, that we had a great success rate for mortgages. We could purchase them all the time, have a great house, pretty affordable. And now, if you just see these graphs, it's ridiculous how sharp it dropped. And then the median across the country is kind of still on average and dropped. It's somewhat affordable, but Utah has spiked. That's surprising. I mean, there's no real reason we should be spiking in the affordability. And the last part of this document goes into, again, the new Utah. I don't like that phrase, new Utah. You tell me what you think, but I don't like it. It says mid-sized external growth, multicultural, aging, elite economy, less affordable. Continue net in migration and declining fertility. No longer strongest job growth. We talked about that earlier. We now rank 10th amongst states in job growth. 10th doesn't sound that bad. It really doesn't. But when you look at it, I mean, over the past 4 or 5 years, you look at 2020, most of the job growth that happened from then to 2022 was just companies that reopened. But it says Utah now ranks 10th among states in job growth. Expect the U.S. and Utah economies to remain resilient but fragile, moderating growth this year. Again, mind you, this report is a couple years old. Ah, that's it's a baffling report, and I'm hoping we can actually put a link to this here. If not, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to give it to you. And it goes into just some of the axioms to guide action. And I find these kind of funny too, because we're talking about growth in housing, economic growth, job growth, and there's three axioms that they're stating. Plant seed corn. Corn's good. I love corn. But quality over quantity. It's always a great statement, but it's pretty vague in the actual guide, quality over quantity. And vigilance amid success. Okay, I agree with those three statements. I do, but it leaves a bit to the imagination. It doesn't really dive into what's happening and any real guides to action. Um, Quality over quantity. It's always a good thing to know. Vigilance amid success. That leaves a lot open to guide with. Now, what we're going to do here, and I hope you're willing to join me along with this because it is a big dive. Now, this one goes into a global document. And this is kind of the base origination where you could say, I wouldn't say really a plan, but more of a forecast or an insight of where we're supposed to be going. And this comes from it's usaid.gov. And again, I hope I can give the links. If not, feel free to reach out to me. If you know me, I'd be happy to give them to you. Now, this one is the summarized, basically, it's the National Security Study Memorandum, okay? 200, NSSM 200, also known as the Kissinger Report. People have heard of the Kissinger Report, but this isn't from this year. This is dated December 10th of 1974, okay? That's when this report came out. We're bringing this up today because of what has been found, and there's a lot of key points on this I really want to bring to your attention. But it used to be a confidential report on this one, of course, because the age, they still do these in confidence, outlines the U.S. government's global population strategy. Okay, again, those words, global population strategy. Okay, back in 1974, so almost 50, a little over 50 years ago now, and its implications for U.S. security and overseas interests. Why do overseas have an interest in our population growth? Gets into this. It's a little freaky. And you're going to see how this connects to Utah's growth, the migration, the infrastructure changes, things of that nature too. And that's what's questionable. So I wanted to make sure we brought this up to you. Now, key points on this one is we'll just jump right into some of the demographic changes overall. And this one, it's on about page 24 and 25 of this report, and hopefully we can show it to you. And this goes into 1974, and this is basically a projection of what they've done from 74 all the way up to the year 2000 in their projected growth rates and fertility. So this touches back on Utah fertility. And you're going to see this goes into, say, Hong Kong, Sri Lanka, Chile, Fiji, and the fertility reports and how they drop. The second chart, which is on page 25 of this report, hopefully my editor can go ahead and show this one to you, is the birth rate and declines from 1955 just through 1972 and how much it dropped at that point. This is what gave them their data to give a projection of growth and fertility rates up to 2000 in this whole report. It's about 123 pages. So if you really want to dig into it, it's quite interesting and a touch scary, to be honest. Some of the key points I wanted to mention to you is that we've had such a rapid growth from World War II up to that point for this report. It was nearing 2% annually year over year, which is pretty aggressive, pretty awesome. Now, the differentiation between rich and poor is a lot of what they go into as well on how much growth was had between those types of nations. And then the momentum. The population momentum means reductions in birth rates will affect the total numbers slowly. And this tracks back to the fertility question. Utah, we see a decline. You may have heard reports over the past few years about certain countries declining in their birth rate and their whole population in general. That's concerning. But again, mind you, this report is back in 1974. Okay. Now this all ties together. So give me a chance. I'm going bit by bit here. And economic and resource implications is the next section we wanted to go into. And this one, I had a particular area I really wanted to read out to you, part of it verbatim. Um, just it's baffling, to be honest. And so with it obviously growing populations will severely impact food needs, especially in the poorest, fastest growing countries. That's something we know. This is more of a highlight note to you, so that's not me talking and not verbatim from the report. But you also have that population growth is a drag on the economy. We talked about that earlier. Sure, it is, but it's more so, do we have the opportunity to grow? Do we have the resources to grow? Do we have jobs to grow? Do we have housing? That would be the drag on it. But again, it's not a major factor in pressure or on depletable resources, but may affect stability in resource-rich developing countries. Don't think I said that quite well. Resource-rich. Sure. I mean, that's something we all know. I mean, you move to a country that has a lot of resources, obviously, it's going to strain the production of what's currently happening. And go down, you see that in the supply and demand every day. There's too many people buying Diet Coke down at your local 7-Eleven. They're going to run out of Diet Coke a lot faster. That's what that means. And then the political effects, of course. And this goes into population factors being diverse. Everybody's got a different opinion, especially if it's out of a different living area. Somebody's got a very differing opinion on how you live your life versus what they're used to. It's not as bad, it just varies. Now, with this one let me see if I can find that. Section 20 is what I looked at. Now, this report, and this is, hear me out here, and I'm going to read out a little bit of it verbatim, so be patient with me. It says the plan of action should be closely coordinated with the International Development Strategy for the second United Nations Development Decade, reviewed in depth at 5-year intervals and modified as appropriate. That's the first piece of it, okay? Now, hear me out on this. It says the plan of action hedges in presenting specific statements of quantitative goals or a time frame for the reduction of fertility. Were they aware of this? These concepts are included, however, in the combination, and it goes into a certain paragraph, so I'm not going to read you all the jumbo on that one. But low variant projections, it is estimated as the result of social and economic development and population policies as reported by countries in the second United Nations inquiry on population and development. There's a lot more. I'm not going to keep reading on that section. But that statement alone, quantitative goals or a time frame for the reduction of fertility. That's a little scary. In a report from 1974, about 50 years ago, they were planning already for a reduction in fertility. And we're going to go into some of these different policies. Again, I've got my little notes here on different slides here that I want to make sure there are snippets I want to read off to you because they're they bothered even me, and I've been aware of this report for a long time. I just never actually read it page by page. Um, but political effects, of course, population factors. We talked about that. People differ from where they're from, their background, how they're raised, their cultures. It's going to change, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but it has to do with um, bringing people together and growing as a community. But the rapid urban growth due to population increase strains government services and may threaten political stability. True, it does strain resources, especially when you're not prepared for it. Again, it goes back to that buying Diet Coke from 7-Eleven. There's not enough. And let's go into there's recommendations on these policies that they give in this document, and that's what's scary. And I mean, this is another one I am going to read off to you a little bit, is they want to focus efforts on key developing countries, okay, that have a high population growth, not developed countries, but developing countries. And then they want to integrate different factors into their developmental planning itself. Okay, why? And increase assistance for family planning services. Again, taking another entity into how you have your family. And this is just my thought from reading that statement alone. It's I have my family. I don't need a third party to help me take care of my family. Um, yeah, and here's where we go into that statement. Um, okay. Now this I am going to read out to you and apologize if it bores you, but it is something really interesting. Okay. And this is the first just two small paragraphs of this section on this slide. Section A is the basic global strategy. Okay. And it says the following basic elements are necessary parts of a comprehensive approach to the population problem, which must include both bilateral and multilateral components to achieve success. I didn't know there was a population problem back in 1974. Thus, the USG population assistance programs will need to be coordinated with those of the major multilateral institutions, voluntary organizations, and other bilateral donors. So already they're implementing different entities to contribute to what they assume and 50 years ago is a population problem. And this goes into the common strategy for dealing with rapid population growth. Now, again, look at that statement. The common strategy for dealing with rapid population growth should encourage constructive actions to lower fertility since population growth over the years will seriously negate reasonable prospects for the sound social and economic development of the peoples involved. That put up a big red flag for me right away. Okay, this strategy for dealing with rapid growth should encourage actions to lower fertility rate. And I'll go back to our section just on Utah alone. We've heard this all over the world. Japan's rates are declining. China's rates are declining. We even know that, China actually had um and don't quote me on it, but it used to have restrictions. You could only have what, one or two kids. I think they brought it back up to two again per family. Are we going that route? That's that's concerning. Um, so again, with these recommendations, and here's my note on section B, had another one in this slide. One issue in any global population strategy is the degree of emphasis in allocation of program resources among countries. Okay, that statement alone, nothing concerning. The options available range from heavy concentration on a few vital large countries to a particular geographical diverse area, just summarizing that bit for you, involving all countries willing to accept such assistance. Assistance from whom? All agencies believe the following policy provides the proper overall balance. Okay, again, I'm not going to read all of this. I'm just going to go into this next paragraph a little bit, and then you do your own research. So, in order to assist the development of major countries and to maximize progress toward population stability, okay, maximize progress towards population stability. Okay, we'll keep going. Primary emphasis would be placed on the largest and fastest growing developing countries where the imbalance between growing numbers and development potential most seriously risks instability, unrest, and international tensions. Now it goes on to list these countries are, and a lot of them are, what we would think of as, those typical Asian, Eurasian, Middle Eastern countries, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria, things of that nature. And it goes on to some more, of course. But again, why would you want to assist population stability? And it's not like, I mean, sure, India's got a large population, so does China. It's what, a third of the world. I don't see it in this list. But implementation of this entire thing, this was another note I had on there. Let me go into this. And I hope it's not freaking you out. If it is, please have some coffee or take a shot of rum, whatever you need. Now, on the implementation is they want to use the World Population Plan. Just that alone, the World Population Plan back in 1974. So if we go into this next page, we may or may not show it or may just highlight a couple snippets of it, but the World Population Plan of Action includes that countries trying for effective fertility levels. I mean, there's a fertility level. I mean, shouldn't you just naturally be fertile? Why would anybody want to control your fertility? Uh, that's crazy, right? But those should be given priority to development programs and health and education strategies, which have a decisive effect upon demographic trends, including fertility. Calls for international information to give priority to assisting such national efforts. Programs are suggested. It goes on a little bit there. Now it's weird. And here's the next part that gets really concerning to me. Bear with me, but hear me out. Food is another special concern in any population strategy. Again, food, population strategy. Adequate food stocks need to be created to provide for periods of severe shortages, and LDC food production efforts must be reinforced to meet increased demand resulting from population and income growth. Well, sure, everybody needs to eat, but why do they have to have stocks of food? That the wording itself is what I go into, folks, is listen to that. Adequate food stocks need to be created. Now, if they're just meaning in production of agriculture, that could be easily said, having adequate farming resources, cattle to actually have our food. Sure, but they don't say that. Adequate stocks. I find that a little strange. Now, U.S. agricultural production goals should take account of the normal import requirements of LDCs, as well as development countries, and likely the occasional crop failures. Without improved food security, there'll be pressure to lead the possible conflict and desire for large families for insurance purposes. They have that in quotes, thus undermining other development and population control efforts. Okay, sure, it might sound hunky-dory. They did go into agriculture a little bit there. But again, population control efforts. Why is there any thought at all to population control? Now, on this one too, this is the functional programs or assistance programs to create conditions for fertility decline. That alone, that's the heading, folks. Hopefully my editor can point this one out. I'll make sure they have the page number, but the heading itself is functional assistance programs to create conditions for fertility decline. So it does read on to a little bit more here that the availability of contraceptives, services, and information, important as it is not the only element required to address population problems. I just wanted to read that statement to you. So, of course, we have birth control, we have condoms, prophylactics, whatever you want to refer to them by, IUDs, and et cetera, et cetera. Not the only element required to address population problems. I don't see people out there on the picket line arguing that somebody's got a five-member family. I think that's a little strange. And this goes on. It does state on here that the desire for large families diminishes as income rises. Personally, I found that to be completely opposite. Growing up, especially here in Utah, I mean, I was born in Gen X, and it was not uncommon. You had five, six kids in one family, maybe up to nine in one family, and they were well-to-do families. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you can have it and afford it, hell, I wouldn't mind having that myself. It didn't happen for me that way, but sure, having a buttload of kids would have been fine by me. Um, again, this goes into just that awareness, and this goes into media and education. That's what they state in this document is that we want to create leadership awareness by media and educational programs. So we touch into that a little bit here. Now, in the education programs, what do you have? Growing up, I used to have the maturation program. And then they teach about coming of age and maturity, or again, maybe in junior high and high school a little bit. You know, people are getting to that age. They don't have them really anymore. My son had one. What was that? He was in fifth grade. Now, was it near what it was when I was growing up? No. And then I can talk back to when I was in high school. There was a limit on clubs and programs in general. So you couldn't even play football unless you paid for it, wrestling, etc. And it was a whole case. I'm not going to go into the details about it because there's some different political connections I'm not even going to go into. But aside from that, it was abstinence was the only thing they were going to teach anymore. And I was 17, so it was that mid to late 90s. But I don't, obviously that's changed, but how they changed it, I'm not sure. And I guess it might have failed. I'll have to look back into that. But I know the programs are very different than what we may have grown up with. And considering social media, kids are always on TikTok and Snapchat, Instagram, whatever it might be. And you can't control it. They go to their friend's house and look at it. Video games are sexualized. I don't know. There's just so much about it that coincides with the whole thing. And then, like it says, media could be social media, could be the news, also your music. Look at these artists. I'm not going to mention one of them, but you can probably imagine what I'm talking about. So in this page here, and again, this is just concerning how they have it worded. And goes in with the AID, UNFPA, the WHO, World Health Organization, and then the Pan American Health Organization, some of these reports. And it goes about integrating with different agencies around the world. And I'm just going to read off one of the recommendations here and some of the wording of it. And I hope you have questions. The first snippet just says the U.S. should encourage heightened international interest in and commitment of resources to developing delivery mechanisms for providing integrated health and family planning services to neglected populations at costs which host countries can support within a reasonable period of time. Interesting, but why would the U.S. have to provide those for other countries in this report? Isn't it supposed to be nationality and nationalism, especially back in 1974? I just find this interesting, and not to cause a stir over just that statement. I just find that interesting. The first section is the one I was going to read, but it's encouraging the World Bank and other international funding mechanisms through the United States representatives on the boards of these organizations. to take a broader initiative in the development in inexpensive service delivery mechanisms in countries wishing to expand such systems. We just back up on that statement. So encouraging the World Bank, and this goes back into, IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, things of that nature. I'm not citing that that's specifically it, but just stating that the World Bank and other international funding mechanisms through United States representatives. That should give you some questions. And there's a lot more, folks. There's a ton more. I've only got a little bit more to go here, so bear with me. I really appreciate your patience, and it's been fun to talk to you. I hope this is more what you'd like to see from me when we do some of these articles, just because it's more conversational for me, and I hope you get a little bit more out of it. Definitely comment below. Let us know. What do you think? How do you like it? And there was one more page in regards to it, the headline itself. This is down in later in the document, concentration on education and indoctrination of the rising generation of children regarding the desirability of smaller family size. I almost felt like a mic drop moment. Okay, so we were talking about Utah, our fertility rates, et cetera, what's happening, and our net growth is mostly from immigration, whether it's from another state or another country. And now we're deep diving into a document that was published back in 1974 on population growth and functionality of the United States and the world. And a statement here, education and indoctrination of the rising generation of children to desire a smaller family. And we see that. Have you seen a lot of the movements of the past 20 years that are, oh no, I don't want any children anymore. I want to be independent, enjoy my life, travel the world, be a social media influencer. I mean, that's just an example, and I apologize for being facetious, but you've seen it. I have too, but that statement alone is alarming, especially when they go into the indoctrination. I mean, I can't say that enough. That whole headline, concentration on education and indoctrination of the rising generation of children regarding the desirability of smaller family size. 1974. So here we are 50 years later. Well, 51 to be exact. Kind of crazy to think about. First quarter century is already gone. But, you know, it goes in the summary of this whole document is just the emphasis to reduce fertility rates and global population growth in general, mostly in developed countries that have the resources to help provide for those that don't, namely yours truly. Recommends a comprehensive approach involving bilateral and multilateral efforts while being cautious not to appear as an industrialized country policy directed against developed nations. Not to appear. Again, folks, I appreciate your patience. You've been amazing with me. And I really hope this touches down and gets you to look at some other objects. Look at these documents. If we can, I would love to have the ability to share these with you because they are public documents now. You just have to go look for them. But how long ago did all of this start? Is my question. That's my personal view, so don't be upset with me. But I love talking with you all. Today has been a busy day. It's been a great day. It's been a fun week. And I really appreciate you joining up with us today. Again, I can't thank the crew I work with enough. They've been great and supportive and provide me so much. And we'll run with it. Again, we're building. We'd also like to see what you like. Is this type of episode something you would prefer? Let us know in the comments. But yeah, we're looking forward to keep providing this to you. I'll give you some deeper dives, and we love you all. Have a fantastic weekend.